everyone. Today we will be going over against animal testing. This is Group 5, Section 4 of Animal Society 67. And the people in this is Emily, Melanie, Eduardo, Daniela, Maya, and Michelle. In these slides, we will be going over the history and background, the unethical aspects, the sociological importance, the current events, the knowledge of materials, and the summary. Hi everyone, I'm Emily, and I will be going over the history and background. So for against animal testing, it started in the late 18th century and 19th century. The 19th century is when movements started for animal testing because of England, where there was a rise of anti-vivisection societies. The NAVS, or NAVS, was found in 1929 to raise awareness to advocate for the elimination of animal testing. Their importance was our mission has expanded to supporting sanctuaries for animals firmly used in research and empowering scientists to pursue innovation. The NAVS has been the biggest and oldest for being against animal testing, but the 20th and 21st century has been busy with the increasing organizations like PETA and increasing activism. With the growing emphasis over the past couple of years, legislation actions has come, like the Animal Welfare Act. It is a federal law that established minimum standard of humane care and handling of animals. Without these groups and acts, animal testing would be much worse. And in the pictures to the right, we have the two organizations, and then one in the bottom right, it is one of the activisms writing for animal rights. But we will next have Melanie going over the unethical aspects.
When fighting against animal testing, it is important to look at the unethical aspects that can occur during these experiments. A major aspect that is brought to many people's attention is the suffering these animals endure in these laboratories during these experiments. Due to drug, food, chemical, and cosmetic testing on animals, more than 100 million animals die and suffer in the U.S. each year. Animals suffer multiple experiment testings that can end up harming them, and even if they are harmed from these products being tested, the product is still given out to the human population. The life these animals endure in laboratories cause constant suffering and anxiety. Before experiments are conducted, animals are put into cages in isolation with no life enrichment and are subjected to loneliness. Although there can be multiple animals in a lab, they are kept separate and usually have to listen to each other, suffer in pain from the experiments, raising their stress levels even higher. These animals can possibly be used multiple times for various experiments if they happen to survive the previous experiments they were a part of. Laboratories are able to get all these animals for testing from breeders, the wild, or shelters. None of these animals were given the chance to live freely and are being put through painful experiments. After the researchers have gathered what is needed, the animals are typically killed to examine tissues and organs, meaning these animals are not given to loving homes after their endured pain.
Thank you, Melanie. Next, we will have Michelle going over the sociological importance of it all.
Sociological importance. Animals cannot speak for themselves or give consent. They cannot agree to be part of the experiments, and they cannot communicate their pain, fear, or discomfort. This raises the issue of whether it is fair or ethical for humans to make these decisions for them, especially when the animals have no voice in what happens or happens to them. The society has a responsibility to protect vulnerable groups. Because animals are vulnerable and dependent on humans, society therefore carries that responsibility to protect them. Just like we protect children, the elderly, and other groups that cannot defend themselves, many people believe we should also protect animals from harm. This becomes a question of moral duty and how we treat those who rely on us. Testing animals as test objects normalize the belief that some lives are less valuable. This can shape society's attitudes by making it seem acceptable to rank living beings based on usefulness. Over time, this mindset can influence how people think about other vulnerable groups as well. A lot of times when people see animals being harmed, the trust in scientific institutions can decrease. Seeing animals harmed in experiments also makes people lose trust, because when the public feels that scientists are being careless or cruel, they may question whether the research is ethical or necessary. This can weaken support for scientific process and reduce cooperation between society and the scientific community. People tend to misuse ethical consumptions by saying things like, I buy cruelty-free products because I care about the animals. They may buy cruelty-free products just to look morally good or to show off their values without truly understanding the impact. This can turn caring about animals into a trend instead of real commitment, which then weakens the deeper message behind the ethical choices being made. When we speak up about the injustice of animal testing, we also support cruelty-free methods, which then strengthen a culture of responsibility and kindness. When people speak up against these injustices, they help promote cruelty-free methods such as computer models, cell cultures, and other alternatives. Supporting these methods encourages a culture that values responsibility, empathy, and kindness. It helps society move forward and move toward a more human scientific practice that respects all life.
Thank you, Michelle. Next, we will be having Eduardo going over the current events.
Alright, so for our ASCI project, we're doing no animal testing. This is against, for current events. My name is Eduardo Esparza. So ethical issues. Many animal rights organizations such as PETA and the Human Society, for example, demonstrate that experiments on animals are cruel, cause suffering, and violate the animal's rights to live free from cruelty. High-profile exposes of conditions within labs have placed this issue under greater public scrutiny. Alternative methods technology is currently making available reasonable substitutes. For example, organ on a chip. Small models mimic human organs and can simulate disease and drug responses. 3D cell cultures as well. Lab-grown human cells also test the toxicity of drugs. So with 3D cell cultures, that's honestly amazing that we could do that, and that instead of using animals, this would be a great alternative, but scientists still believe that using animals is the best outcome for testings. Anyways, computer modeling predictions of chemical effects or drugs are possible without using actual animals. Legislative change. The European Union, India, and Israel have banned animal testing on cosmetics. The United States has gradually expanded funding or research into alternatives to animal testing. And I have some side notes here that government efforts to reduce animal testing, such as the U.S. National Institute of Health shifting funding priority to human-based research, and the U.S. Navy ending experiment on cats and dogs. So it's not just mice, bunnies and monkeys and other things like that have like actual human DNA. It's our everyday pets that we call our best friends and things like that. Like it's not right, and honestly, we should change the way we do things, especially if it's saving our nature and keeping things steady without having to ruin. How would I say that? Without having to ruin honestly, just like I don't know how I would say that. But you guys get what I'm trying to say is we could use other alternatives, but scientists don't want to do that. But thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. Next, we will have Daniela going over the knowledge of the
And
material.
now for my second slide on the against animal testing. Animal testing is the unnatural, inhumane, and often painful way scientists do experiments on animals for the benefit of humans, whether it is for medication or cosmetics. Due to this experiment, a lot of animals, these test subjects, are killed millions per year. Some of these animals, such as mice, monkeys, cats, dogs, rats, rabbits, and even more animals, are used for these experiments. They suffer unimaginable pain on a daily basis, which often affects their mental state and also inflicts negative behavior. Some of those can be pacing back and forth, just like where an animal is held in a zoo exhibit or an aquarium. That pacing back and forth, also doing a lot of repetitive movements. Some of those can also be, those movements can also harm themselves or harm others. Some of those examples could be ripping their own hair or biting themselves as well. Animals that are considered, cold-blooded or mice, rats, birds, they are not protected from the Animal Welfare Act, the AWA, that was passed on in year 1966, because they are not viewed or qualify to be considered an animal. Now that technology has developed and technology is more advanced, and technology can be used in this type of testing instead of having animals being tested on, such as it can be tested out on medications and cosmetics, and all of this can be done without harming any animals in the process. There are human tissues and cells, computer models or cell lines that can be used to do these medical and cosmetic tests on, which are great alternatives instead of having to test on animals. Thank you.
Next, we will have Maya doing the summary of our sites.
Those who argue against animal testing do so because of the following reasons. The arguments to stop animal testing started in the late 18th century in England with the rise of anti-vivisection societies. People say that without groups like NAVS and PETA, animal testing's conditions would be considerably worse than they currently are, seeing as no attention would have been brought to the scientists or their conditions, and there would have been no way for the outside people to know how these animals are truly treated. They argue that animals can't speak for themselves, and we as a society must protect those who are vulnerable and without a voice. Animal testing brings up the belief that those who can't fight for themselves are less valuable, and we all know, at least if you have a pet, that some animals can be more valuable than humans. There are also alternative methods for animal testing, one being technology, which is becoming increasingly advanced. 3D cell cultures and computer modeling can all be used without having to use animals as a part of scientific testing. So they argue, since all these methods are available, why aren't they being used, and why are so many animals still being used? There's also a large number of animals or test subjects being killed in unnatural, inhumane, and painful ways. Mice, rats, birds, and cold-blooded animals are not protected by the AWA because they are not at a quality to be considered animals. They argue against those for the four showing that the main animals being used are not protected by the laws that they think they are, and they are not being given the same conditions that they should be. Animal testing affects the animal's physical and mental state by causing them to pace back and forth, along with harming themselves by biting and ripping out their own fur. So, clearly, animal testing is having a negative effect, not only physically but mentally on animals. These are our sources.
And in these sources, we have the activation groups like PETA and the NAVs, and most are from the activation groups. But all to say,
And thank you for listening to our presentation.